From Utah Public Radio, this is Undisciplined. Actually, hey, Reagan?
Yeah, Matthew?
That's Undisciplined producer and frequent guest host, Reagan Edelman, everyone. Hey, Reagan, can we change something this week?
Okay, what do you have in mind?
Okay, so our theme music, it's not quite right for this episode. I'm going to send you a link here, okay? Ready?
Yep.
Okay, you got it?
All right, yeah, I've got it.
Okay, could we use that one instead?
Matthew, you are such a nerd.
Yeah, I know. Cool?
Cool.
From Utah Public Radio, this is Undisciplined. I'm Matthew LaPlante. Even if you are a fan of the Star Wars movies, you might be confused as to what was keeping Luke Skywalker's family on the desert planet of Tatooine. This was, after all, the driest of dry planets in the galaxy, where the very thing that makes life possible, both in that fictional universe and in our own, was very hard to come by. So Luke's aunt and uncle had set up a moisture farm, and they used temperamental machines called vaporators to draw water from the air. That was science fiction when the first Star Wars movies were released in the 1970s, but it's a reality today. You can buy an atmospheric water generator for a few $1,000s. For now, though, these are niche products. But Anjali Mulchandani doesn't think they need to be. Mulchandani leads the Water and Environmental Resource Sustainability Group at the University of New Mexico, where a primary area of her research is making atmospheric water harvesting scalable in places like New Mexico, which is one of the driest states in the nation. Solutions like these are important because while nothing is ever certain, almost every model of future climate suggests that Western North America will grow substantially drier as global surface temperatures continue to get hotter. And that likely means less water, at least through traditional means. But Mulchandani thinks we have reason for a new hope, not in a galaxy far, far away, but in our own communities, and soon. Anjali Mulchandani, welcome.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Okay, I want to start today not by talking about moisture harvesting. I want to talk about sludge. You spent your first 2 years as a graduate student. This is at Arizona State University, great institution, studying ways to mine sludge for minerals like gold. So let's just pause here so that I can say those words again. Mining sludge for gold. This is gross, and also so good at the same time. Tell me about that work.
That is such a good question. I moved to Arizona State University. I was looking for opportunities to think about how we could introduce sustainability into our environmental systems. And I was introduced to the opportunity of mining wastewater solids. Now, we as a society tend to flush our toilets and then not think about what goes down the drain.
I don't want to think about what goes down the drain.
Modern plumbing is such an amazing invention. It's what's enabled us to grow and scale our buildings, to build these large urban centers. But I actually think that it is important for us to know what happens after we flush the toilet. Because everything that you have fed yourself, everything that you have done to modify your body, such as put in gold crowns and fillings, all of that eventually goes down the sink or down the toilet or down your shower drain. And that includes food, it includes nutrients, it includes metals, it also includes pharmaceuticals and personal care products. And all of that ends up going to a wastewater treatment plant. And over time, we have tried to engineer these wastewater treatment plants to make the water as clean as possible because we've been so focused on water reuse. But the reality is that everything that you remove from the water has to go somewhere. And where it goes is the solids. And if you really want to think about recycling your resources, you need to go to the poop, not to the water.
Okay, all right. So when you were doing this research, there's a poop room somewhere, right? A poop vat somewhere that you go to like study this stuff?
That's a fascinating question. So at a wastewater treatment plant, we have a liquids treatment train and a solids treatment train. And so essentially, we have what seems like a snow globe. In a snow globe, you've got particles floating around in a liquid. And when you shake it up, that's basically what your sewage is.
Are you talking about a poop snow globe right now?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Now, when you stop shaking the snow globe, all the snow falls to the bottom because of gravity. And that's exactly what we do at a wastewater treatment plant. We take all the solids, they settle to the ground by gravity, and then we take them off to solids treatment processing. And that is where we essentially can mine all of this lovely solid for energy, for metals, for nutrients. And that solid is a massive untapped resource right now.
Okay, can we get back to the question of the gold, though? How much gold is there in all that poop?
This isn't a new gold rush. I think that gold was a really good selling point because it was a high value metal that was found at higher than trace concentrations in your solids. So it was something that you could reasonably take out of sludge and turn into something that would be a new commodity product.
It's enticing. Like
Yes.
I'm like years later, I'm asking you about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is an exciting prospect.
You made sludge sexy.
Wouldn't go that far.
Okay, so one of the things that you were taken by in the process of studying waste and wastewater is just how much that process wastes water. And that got you thinking about other ways to find water because this process that we use wastes so much of it. So what's the point then that you like look up in the sky and you're like, oh, there's water there? Like, what was the dawning moment for you?
There are multiple dawning moments. I would say, for one, it's the idea that you can mine a resource that's hidden in plain sight. There is an abundant resource that you are already surrounded by in your everyday life that you could tap into.
Like in this room that we are in right now, there is
Yes.
water in this room.
There's water in this room all around us that you could tap into. The same way that we all produce poop, and that poop contains a little bit of gold and a little bit of aluminum and some nitrogen and phosphorus. The same way the air around us that we breathe out of our own bodies contains moisture that we can harvest ourselves as a drinking water source.
And you've noted many times in the past that lakes and rivers are sometimes very far away from people. You just mentioned sometimes they're on private property, sometimes they're just not accessible, but the atmosphere is everywhere. Everybody on this planet presumably could, if they found themselves in need of doing so, harvest moisture from the air.
Yes, that is correct. The amount of water that is available in the air around us is 6 times more than in rivers. For centuries, humans have followed river systems to set up their communities. They've migrated with the flow of rivers. We have chased this liquid water supply and moved our societies as this water moves. Instead, if we think about an alternative supply that is always there with us, we could reframe how we think about making it so that we have to settle somewhere and we have to set roots in a certain location where the water is available to us, or move once that water supply dries up.
Because right now, almost every major metropolitan area in the world is on an ocean shoreline, often right at the confluence of a river or upstream on that river. And that's almost all of human civilization and settlement everywhere. As you say, there's 6 times more water in the atmosphere than there is in all of those rivers. That's a lot of water. But until it condenses and falls as rain, it has in the past been a bit tricky to collect. But more recently, water harvesting has been centered on what you have called the conventional approach. That's dew point condensation. Basically, that's utilizing a surface that has a temperature below whatever the dew point temperature is, right?
Yes, that's correct. That is the most efficient way, as of right now, to collect water from the air. It's similar to when you wake up in the morning and you go outside and there's blades of grass that suddenly have these dew droplets on them. They didn't appear out of nowhere. Those dew droplets have collected because the blade of the grass overnight was so cold that the water around it condensed. And so we can engineer those technologies to collect water from the air, but it only works in some climates.
And those are climates that have higher relative humidity to begin with.
Yes.
And the ones that have the higher it is, the easier it is to do. As you get lower with relative humidity, we're talking about requiring things like coolant, lots of energy, and those needs and those costs can be efficient in those high relative humidity areas, which also happen to be areas that often have other forms of sources of water. But the areas with lower relative humidity, like where we are right now in Albuquerque, like Arizona, where you did your graduate studies, it's harder to get this thing to work. So you have been a proponent of an idea and have developed this idea that can advance this technology. And this is related a little bit to these little packets that we find in dry foods and inside of like new shoes.
Yes. So have you ever opened a box of shoes and found that little white packet and it says silica gel, don't eat?
Don't eat.
And you just think, what is this trash in my box?
When you're a kid, you think it's got to be tasty because it says don't eat.
Yes. Sometimes if you put that hazard sign, it actually prompts people to wonder a little bit more. But I mean, before I started working on this research, I would just think like, oh, that's just an extra thing that comes in my box. I'm not even going to think about it. I'm not even going to give it the time of day. It's just going in the trash can. But it turns out that if you were to open that packet that says silica gel, don't eat, you would find these little clear or white beads inside. And those beads can pull and hold on to excess moisture in the air. And they can work down to 5 or 10% relative humidity. So very, very, very low levels of moisture in the air around us can be attached to that silica gel. And that's what we've been looking at in more recent years. Over the last 1 or 2 decades, a lot of the research focus has moved into solid desiccants rather than condensation-based systems.
Okay, and what was it? I mean, what was it? Did you open a package of like protein powder one day and go like, oh, wait, or like what was the moment that you go like, desiccants, I know what I'm going to study?
Honestly, I don't think it was that profound. I recall in 2016, I was searching for a new area of research to study, and my advisor at Arizona State University said, well, you know, there's this beetle that lives off the coast of Africa.
The one with the little moisture drop on its back.
Yeah, and it collects water on its back. Maybe you could look into that. And I did, and it turns out that that beetle is called the Namib desert beetle. It lives in the coast of Africa in the Namibian desert, and it's got this really fascinating back. It's got these alternating hydrophilic and hydrophobic bumps. So hydrophilic means water-loving, hydrophobic means water-hating. And when you create this grid-like pattern of loving and hating surfaces, you actually create the perfect surface for water droplets to settle and then roll down the hydrophobic back over into the beetle's mouth. And there has been a lot of work in a field called biomimicry to mimic the beetle's back and create these hydrophilic, hydrophobic surfaces. And there's all these examples in nature of life forms that are able to sustain themselves off of water in the air around us or just limited supplies of water. And it inspired me to think about how I could also create sustainable systems that could do the same thing.
So how do we take now the desiccants and integrate those into the more conventional methods for water harvesting to make a system that's more efficient?
Now, desiccants are amazing because they hold on to water, but what makes them amazing also is their downfall.
Yeah, because they're holding onto the water and you need to get them to release that water so that you can have that water.
Exactly. So recent efforts in the research area has focused on how do we effectively release the water from the perfect silica gel or other desiccant material that is so water loving. Most methods use thermal heat. The idea is that if you were to use these silica gel packets that were in your shoebox, you could put them in the microwave or the oven and they would dry out. And then you could reuse them almost indefinitely. So how to engineer a system that uses this? Well, it ends up looking something like a rotating pizza. And most of this rotating disc or pizza is exposed to air that is blowing over this disc that has little silica gel almost decorated over it, like pepperoni on a pizza, let's just say. And then about 1/4 of this rotating wheel is exposed to a heater where essentially this pepperoni, that are your water molecules, get knocked off the pizza and they move into a condensation chamber. So you're basically actively both collecting water on the surface of your wheel and then also disposing of the water over into a condensation zone.
You got a National Science Foundation grant to study this problem early on. Your former advisor, Paul Westerhoff, once described it as a do whatever she wants grant.
This is true.
So I want to take a little detour right now so that you can tell me the secret to getting the NSF to write a check for whatever the heck you want to do.
The magical secret is called the National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship. The National Science Foundation has funded several thousand graduate students every year to work on STEM-related projects. You write a research proposal on anything that you wish, as long as it's within the STEM umbrella. You write a personal statement about your journey in the research space, and it goes through a panel of reviewers who are reviewing you as a person as well as the proposal. And they fund the person rather than the proposal. So once you get funded, you can study whatever you want. Many students will study what they proposed. Many students, like myself, will study another topic that is of interest to them.
Wait. So when you proposed it, you didn't propose this pizza disc thing.
When I wrote the NSF proposal, it was on harvesting metals from poop. Thank you very much.
You used the sexiness of the sludge in order to convince the NSF to give you money that you then used to solve the world's water woes.
Yes. But it did kick off a whole new area of research for our research team in Arizona and now here in New Mexico. I think it's great because it allows you to do what we call high risk, high reward research. Sometimes there's a great idea out there and you just need people to back you because they know that you are capable and you're going to try something and something cool is going to come out of it. You don't know what that is yet. I can't predict for you where I'm going to be in 3 years. But what I can show you is my track record, and I can show you the ideas that I have today and the fact that I am capable of coming up with cool ideas that will lead me to a pretty great result 3 years down the road.
And you ended up using this funding really meaningfully. Like by the time you're done with your graduate studies, you'd made some pretty substantial leaps in this area, particularly in the use of photothermal nanomaterials to enhance desorption from these desiccants. So basically, like, got to figure out that microwave part. And you're like, wait a second, hold on. We can use these photothermal materials in order to increase heating in the parts of this spinning pizza disc that we need to increase heating in so that we can get those desiccants to release their water.
Yeah, exactly. So the idea is we need a thermal heat source. And every day I would walk outside in Arizona and I would feel a thermal heat source burning my skin. And that is the sun. The sun is this universally abundant source of light and of energy and of heat. And if you can harness the sun to help power these desiccant water harvesters, you could maybe get around the energy problem. So at that time, I was part of a National Science Foundation center called NEWT, which stood for Nano-Enabled Water Treatment. And there was a group of researchers out of Rice University who were studying a material called carbon black. And it was basically this jet black powder that when they put it in a cup of water and they put the cup of water outside, that water would start to boil. And it turns out that it's just like any dark black material that you put out in the sun. Think of a black car that sits out in the sun for 3 to 5 hours. You get inside and you feel like you're baking inside. And it's because the color black absorbs all wavelengths of the solar spectrum. And as it absorbs all those wavelengths, these little nanoparticles will superheat. And so they absorb sunlight, they start shaking and shaking and shaking, and if you get all of these nanoparticles to shake really close to one another, suddenly you've got this nanoparticle dance party, and then they all start to heat up, And now your desiccants are starting to heat and the water vapor gets really excited and it bounces off the desiccant and you're able to then collect that water.
And here's the curveball on this is that one of the cool things about this is that the places that are most dry and likely drying faster under climate warming are the places with the most copious sunshine. So your source for activating these photothermal nanomaterials and getting that little dance party going. And that can also be used to power the water generators, the electricity you need to get this thing going. That's a pretty sweet little arrangement.
And it provides a new opportunity space for a technology that most people dismiss in arid regions.
Okay, one of the other challenges here is that air is often dirty and the water from the air is not automatically clean water. So there needs to be a filtering component. You added that to your model unit as well.
Yeah, so the water quality discussion is something that we're really leaning into right now. The reality is that if there is water in the air and that air also holds other pollutants, other aerosols, other trace gases, when you condense that water, those particles and those gases are coming along for the ride, and they are also entering your water supply. And it turns out that when you measure the quality of this water, it is not pure in the sense of distilled H2O only. There are metals in that water, there are organics in that water, and boy, are there microbials in that water. Things that grow, that use the organics as food. And our group now has been looking at whether you can use air quality to learn about water quality. Because once you optimize the system, once you optimize the energy, that system gets deployed, the next thing that you need to think about is whether that water is safe. And I would argue that that is just as important a question, if not more important a question, than how much energy does it use.
And this is a particular consideration because we have a rapidly urbanizing planet. Urban areas are the places where water or where air quality tends to be the worst. If we're drawing water from those airs, what we're going to get with that is this not very tasty water.
Yes, exactly. So we can now think about what it would take to clean that water. And environmental engineers and water treatment engineers have thought extensively about how we treat liquid waters. We know how to treat surface water, we know how to treat groundwater based on the chemicals that we know of in those water supplies. So we can apply the same sorts of treatment to atmospheric water. And it's fine to an extent. But my argument, and this is a new argument, we're still workshopping it, there are chemicals that are in the air that are not in liquid waters. Our atmospheric waters, we have found contaminants like formaldehyde in them at concentrations that are relevant. Formaldehyde is not a common pollutant that we measure for or regulate in our surface waters or our groundwaters. Therefore, there's no need to regulate them right now. But if we find them in a new water supply without appropriate regulation, we could be hurting people.
If we can get the bugs out of this system, literally in some cases the bugs out of the system as well as everything else that might be in that water, this is something that you have framed so far as a solution that makes the most sense in emergency. Do you think it's scalable beyond that? Like, is there a potential future in which we can support some degree or even a large degree of the day-to-day water needs of communities through atmospheric water harvesting?
I have a multifaceted answer to this. The first is on the drinking water side. I think that there is the potential to use atmospheric water harvesting as a drinking water supply at a small scale. Mostly because of the price issue, but if we were to figure out the price issue, then I think that you could reasonably harvest several gallons of water a day per person. However, domestic water use, at least in the United States, is only 10 to 14% of our total water use. The majority of our water goes to industry and agriculture. And I actually think that water harvesting could be a really fascinating solution to providing additional water resilience to those sectors so that they are not pulling from our surface or groundwater as heavily.
That's Anjali Mulchandani. She leads the Water and Environmental Resource Sustainability Group at the University of New Mexico, where a primary area of her research is making atmospheric water harvesting scalable in some of the driest places in the world. Anjali, thank you.
Thank you.
UnDisciplined is a production of Utah Public Radio, and if you happen to live in Utah, you can listen to us on UPR every Thursday morning at 10:30. If you miss us then, you can listen to every episode of UnDisciplined wherever you get your podcasts. Our program is supported by the College of Humanities and Social Sciences at Utah State University, and from listeners like you. Yes, you can support our work at donate.nprstations.org/UPR. Our producer is Reagan Edelman. Our theme music is Little Idea by Benjamin Tissot. And I'm Matthew LaPlante. Thank you for listening. Now go have big ideas.